Marcus Webb was 34 years old, climbing the most dangerous mountains in the world. Nothing scared him, until he found something buried in the snow at 4,200 meters of altitude that would change everything. An image of the Virgin Mary where nothing should exist, and what happened in the days that followed challenged every certainty he had about the world. A miracle of the Virgin Mary that began in the most impossible place. But before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. Do you know that kind of person who does everything alone? Who never asks for help because they think no one will do it right? Marcus was like that, a professional mountaineer from Denver, the kind that other climbers admired but could never truly get close to. It was a January morning at the base camp in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. The temperature was 8 degrees. Marcus was outside his tent checking his gear for the third time. Everything organized with military precision. Tom, the veteran base guide with 40 years of mountain experience, approached with steaming coffee in his hands. Webb, the forecast changed. A low-pressure system is coming in earlier. Maybe you should delay 2 days. Marcus didn't even lift his eyes from the equipment. I don't need to. Marcus, it's not a matter of... I said I don't need to, Tom. The voice wasn't loud, but it had that final tone that left no room for discussion. Tom shook his head. You don't argue with Marcus Webb. He had the numbers to prove he knew what he was doing. 32 mountains climbed, 21 of them solo, 0 serious accidents. Marcus finished checking his gear, grabbed his backpack, and adjusted the straps without looking at anyone. At 6:17 a.m. on January 15th, Marcus began his ascent. Alone, as always. The first 2 days were perfect. Clear skies, stable temperature at 12 degrees, moderate wind. Marcus was making excellent time. By the end of the first day, he had reached 3,100 meters. He set up his tent on a protected rocky platform, ate his meal without hurry, checked the GPS, slept well. The second day was even better. The mountain cooperating, every movement precise, efficient. Marcus was in that mental zone where everything flows naturally. Around 4 p.m., he reached 3,800 meters, stopped for water, looked down. He could see the base camp, tiny in the distance. He smiled slightly. He was right, as always. He set up camp early. There were still 3 hours of daylight left, but it wasn't worth the risk of pushing further. Tomorrow he would reach 4,200 meters, the goal. He ate, checked his gear, lay down as the sun disappeared behind the peaks to the west. It was during the night that everything changed. Marcus woke up to the sound. It wasn't the usual wind. It was something different, louder, more violent. He checked his watch, 2:33 a.m. He unzipped the tent slightly and looked outside. He couldn't see anything. The darkness was absolute. But he could feel it. The temperature had dropped drastically. The wind was much stronger. He closed the tent and checked the barometer. The pressure had plummeted. Tom had been right about the low-pressure system, but it had arrived much faster than any forecast indicated. Marcus couldn't fall back asleep. The wind worsened by the minute. At 5 a.m., when he would normally start getting ready for the day, Marcus stepped out of the tent. The world had changed, snow falling so dense he could barely see 3 meters ahead. The wind had to be at 70, maybe 80 kilometers per hour. And the temperature, the thermometer read 18 degrees. With the wind chill, probably 35 degrees 6. Marcus stood there for 5 minutes, assessing. He could go down. It was the logical decision. Return to 3,100 meters, where he had camped on the first day, wait for the storm to pass there. But that meant losing 2 days of progress. And Marcus didn't lose progress. He looked upward. Through the snow, he could vaguely see the rocky formations that marked the route toward 4,000 meters. He made the decision. He would continue for a few more hours. If it got too bad, he would set up camp and wait right there. It was the first wrong decision. During the next 6 hours, Marcus climbed through the worst storm he had ever faced. With every step, the mountain became more hostile. The snow wouldn't stop. The wind got worse, and the temperature kept falling. Around noon, though it was impossible to tell under the uniform gray sky, Marcus realized he was in trouble. His fingers were losing sensitivity even inside the thermal gloves. His thoughts began slowing down, becoming confused. It was hard to stay coherent, and the worst part, he was disoriented. The GPS said 4,150 meters, but Marcus couldn't see where he was. He needed shelter, immediately. He began searching desperately, any rock formation, anything that could block the wind. He tried digging, but he had no strength. The compacted snow wouldn't give. After a few centimeters, he collapsed from exhaustion. His hands began to bleed where the frozen snow had cut through the glove palms. Marcus fell to his knees. You know that moment when you realize you're no longer in control, when all your skills simply stop making a difference? Marcus had that moment, kneeling in the snow at 450 meters. His body was shutting down. He could feel it, the way his muscles no longer responded properly. Moderate hypothermia, maybe 20 minutes before it became severe. After that, an hour, 2 at most? He tried to stand up, fell to the side. And that was when it happened. When he fell, his right arm sank into the snow. It didn't just sink. It went straight through, as if there were nothing underneath. Marcus felt something solid beneath the snow, not rock, wood. With the last remnants of strength, he began digging with pure desperation. 30 seconds later, he saw it. Blue, faded blue, but still visible even through layers of snow and time. Marcus dug more. And there, buried in the snow, was an image of the Virgin Mary. It was perhaps 40 centimeters tall, carved in dark wood, oak maybe. The blue-painted mantle had areas where the paint had completely vanished, but others where that deep color still remained. The face was preserved, hands extended forward. Marcus stayed there on his knees, staring, his brain trying to process through the fog of hypothermia. How had that ended up there so far from everything? But he had no time for questions. He had maybe 15 minutes before losing consciousness. He pulled the image from the snow. It weighed more than he expected, and in that moment, it saved his life. Because when Marcus pulled the image completely free, the snow next to it collapsed, not slowly, all at once, as if something that had been holding it up was suddenly removed. It revealed a crack in the rock, an opening perhaps 80 centimeters wide and 1 meter high, and beyond it, darkness that meant depth. Marcus didn't think. He pushed his backpack inside first, then squeezed his body through the opening, dragging the image with him. Inside, the difference was immediate. The wind that had been stealing every gram of heat from his body, stopped completely. Marcus pulled out his flashlight with fingers that barely worked, turned it on. The fissure was larger than it looked from outside, a natural cavity in the rock, perhaps 3 meters deep and 2 meters wide. Not perfect, but it was shelter. He set up the emergency tent with great difficulty, something he would normally do in minutes. He got inside the tent, removed his gloves. His hands were white with purple patches on the fingertips. He began massaging them, forcing circulation. He ate by force, drank water, and waited for his body to react. After 30 minutes, he finally started to feel his fingers again. The pain was intense but welcome. Pain meant circulation. Marcus took off the heavy jacket, checked his body. Cuts on his hands, bruises on his knees, but nothing serious. He would survive. Only then did he look at the image of the Virgin Mary. He had placed it in the corner of the tent, leaning against the fabric wall. The flashlight's beam cast shadows across the carved face. Marcus stared at it for a long time. It had to be a coincidence. Someone, probably decades ago, maybe even longer, had lost or abandoned that picture there. And by pure luck, He had stumbled on it. And by pure luck, when he pulled it, the snow beside it gave way, revealing the crevice. Luck. 2 coincidences in a row, nothing more. But even as he thought that, a part of Marcus, a small part he usually ignored, didn't fully believe it. He kept staring at the picture while the storm howled outside. He slept poorly. The cold, the pain, and something he didn't know how to name. He woke with the first sign of light crossing the opening of the crevice. The storm had passed during the night. Marcus stepped out carefully. The world was completely transformed. Fresh snow covered everything. His trail from yesterday gone. Any reference he had used buried. He grabbed the GPS, 4,150 meters, and now he had to descend. He looked at the map. The original route he had planned was northeast, the longer path, but with a gentler slope. Marcus studied the terrain around him. Through the fresh snow, he tried to identify the rock formations that would indicate the right way. And then, without thinking too much, almost instinctively, he began descending toward the west. It wasn't the planned route. It was steeper, more technical. Normally he wouldn't choose that path, but it was the direction his body wanted to go in that moment. Marcus followed the instinct. Over the next 3 hours he descended carefully. The new path was difficult but feasible. Exposed in some places, but nothing he couldn't handle. Around midday, he stopped for water on a rocky platform. He thought he had already passed the worst. The 4th day of descent was the most technical. Marcus reached a section that required rappelling, a vertical wall of about 30 meters. He had done this kind of descent hundreds of times. It was routine. He found a solid anchor point, prepared the rappel perfectly, every knot checked. He began the rappel. Smooth, controlled movements, letting the rope slide through the belayed device at a steady speed. He was 15 meters from the top, halfway down, when he felt it. The rope gave way. Not a little. It gave way completely. The scream caught in his throat. Just enough time to think, so this is how it ends. Free fall, 1 meter, 2 meters, and then it stopped. The impact knocked all the air out of his lungs. But it stopped. Marcus hung there, swaying slightly, his heart exploding inside his chest. What? How? He looked up, trying to process what he was seeing. The rope had broken at the anchor point. He could see the loose end swaying up above, but his section of the rope, the part he was attached to, had snagged on a rock ledge, a small ledge. Marcus stared, trying to understand the physics of what had just happened. The angle was wrong. The rotation required for the rope to reach that ledge during a vertical fall didn't make sense. And yet it happened. Marcus hung there for a full 5 minutes, breathing, processing. Finally, with very careful movements, he managed to reposition himself and continue the descent using the new accidental anchor point. When he reached the ground, his legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees in the snow. Marcus packed his gear with trembling hands, but not from the cold this time. The marking image at the shelter. And now this. 2 moments when it should have ended. 3 moments when something different happened. Marcus continued the descent, but the small voice was no longer so small. On the 6th day, Marcus knew he was reaching his limit. His food supplies had run out the day before. He still had water, but exhaustion was beginning to affect everything. Every step required conscious focus. The muscles in his legs trembled constantly. His vision had those black spots at the edges again. He knew the signs, knew them far too well. 1 more day, maybe 2 at most, and he simply wouldn't be able to go on. Base camp was at Warrant 800. On a good day, a 4-hour hike. In his condition, 8 hours, maybe more, and it was getting dark. Marcus set up the tent for the last time. He lay down, and for the first time in his adult life, at least the first time he could remember, Marcus prayed. They weren't pretty words. It wasn't the Hail Mary he no longer remembered from childhood. It was only, "If you're out there, I need help. Please. He didn't even know who he was talking to. God? The Virgin Mary? The universe? It didn't matter. They were the words of a man at his absolute limit. He slept. He woke up warm. Relatively warm, at least. Something was different. Marcus unzipped the tent and looked outside. The sky was completely clear. Not a single cloud. The sun hitting hard. And the temperature. The thermometer read 5 Eastus, almost tropical compared to the previous days. Marcus stepped out fully and looked around. It was as if the mountain had decided to give him a break, just for today. And then he heard it, distant, very distant, but unmistakable. Helicopter. Marcus grabbed the emergency flare with hands that could barely hold it. He lit it. Bright orange smoke rose in a straight column in the still air. He waved his arms. The helicopter was too far away. It hadn't seen him. Marcus lit the second flare, the last one he had. This time, the helicopter turned. 20 minutes later, Marcus was inside the aircraft. Thermal blanket wrapped around him, a paramedic checking his vitals with a worried expression. The pilot looked back. You got lucky. Tom at base camp got worried when he lost contact. We organized a search, but the weather was impossible. This morning we woke up to this perfect window. 3 hours of clear skies. We managed to fly. Marcus, his voice hoarse from days without speaking much, asked, Was it in the forecast? The pilot shook his head. No. It came out of nowhere. Meteorology didn't predict it. And it's already closing again. Look. Marcus looked out the window. Clouds were already beginning to form again over the peaks. 3 hours. A window of exactly 3 hours. The time needed to find him and bring him back. Marcus rested his head against the helicopter seat and closed his eyes. 3 times. When he finally arrived at the base, Tom ran toward him. Marcus, thank God. We thought you were dead. Why? Tom pointed toward the mountain. There was a massive avalanche on the northeast side. It was your planned route. When we lost contact, we thought you were there. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. What day was it? The 4th, between 10 Square and 10:30, Marcus calculated. If he had followed the original route, he would have been exactly at that spot, exactly at that time. But he wasn't, because something made him change direction. He simply nodded. There was nothing to say. At the hospital 48 hours after the rescue, Marcus was alone in the room. Severe hypothermia had been treated. Severe dehydration treated. Mild frostbite on his fingers being treated. The doctors were impressed. Under the conditions he described, survival was unlikely. A lot of luck, the doctor had said. A whole lot. Marcus stared at the white ceiling of the room, his bandaged hands resting on the sheet, and he processed. 4 moments where someone changed the outcome, and for the first time without trying to run from the truth, he admitted it wasn't luck. They weren't coincidences. It was the Virgin Mary. When that thought finally formed completely in his mind, when he finally stopped fighting it, something broke inside him. Marcus began to cry. Not a silent cry, not a few tears he could hide, deep sobs that came from a place he had kept locked away for years, the kind of crying that happens when all the defenses he built finally collapse at once. He cried for years of arrogance, for believing he didn't need anything or anyone, for building walls so high that even he couldn't get out anymore. He cried for the loneliness he had chosen and then convinced himself he preferred. And he cried for the realization, finally, after refusing it for so long, that there was something greater than him, something that had saved him not once, but 4 times, even when he had never asked, even when he didn't believe. The nurse walked in to check his vitals and found him like that. She didn't say anything. She just placed her hand gently on his shoulder and stood there for a moment before leaving quietly. It took 15 minutes for Marcus to stop crying. When he finally composed himself, something fundamental had changed. He could feel it, as if an armor he had worn for decades had finally been removed. He looked out the hospital window. Down below he could see a small chapel. Marcus, who hadn't stepped inside a church in over a decade, seriously considered going down there as soon as he was discharged. A week later, Marcus was home. A small apartment in Denver. His expedition gear was in a pile in the corner. Tom from the base had brought everything a few days earlier. Marcus opened the main backpack carefully. His still bandaged hands made everything harder. And there it was, the statue of the Virgin Mary. He had placed it in the backpack before being rescued. He hadn't thought much about it, just packed it along with everything else. Marcus held the image with both hands. He walked to the shelf in the living room. There were a few books there, trophies from old competitions. He pushed everything to the side and placed the image in the center. He stared at it for a long time. Then he grabbed his phone, scrolled until he found a name he hadn't called in years. Jennifer, his sister, 4 years since their last real conversation. Small birthday messages, but nothing more. The phone rang 4 times. Marcus almost hung up. "Marcus?" Her voice was surprised. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay, Jen, but I need to tell you something." And he told her everything. The storm, almost dying, the image, the 4 moments, the rescue, the growing certainty. Jennifer listened in silence on the other end. When Marcus finished, he heard her crying. "Jennifer, what is it?" "Marcus?" Her voice was breaking. "I prayed every day. Since I found out you had gone up the mountain, I asked specifically for the Virgin Mary to protect you, to bring you back." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "You prayed. Every day." The tears returned. "And she brought you back," Jennifer continued. "She really did." They talked for 3 hours, the longest conversation they'd had since they were teenagers. Jennifer told him about her life, about her husband, her 2 children, about how she had always missed her brother but respected the distance he had created. Marcus talked about the years of loneliness, about finally realizing he had been wrong, about wanting to change but not knowing how. "You've already changed," Jennifer said softly. "You're calling me, you're telling me all of this. The Marcus from a month ago would never have done that." She was right. When they hung up, Marcus sat on the couch, looking at the picture on the shelf. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me." The following months brought gradual transformation. Marcus started seeing his doctor regularly again. His physical recovery was surprisingly good. His fingers regained full sensitivity. The wounds healed without complications. 1 year after the incident, Marcus was preparing equipment for a new expedition, but it was completely different from a year before. He was at the same base camp where everything had started. Tom was there, making coffee as always. "Forecast changed," Tom commented. Marcus accepted the coffee, sat down beside Tom. "I'll wait," he said simply. Tom nearly dropped his own cup. "You? Agreeing to wait?" Marcus smiled. "I've learned a few things." He realized it had never been about achievements or proving something. It was about recognizing that he had never been alone, even when he thought he was, even when he wanted to be. There was someone watching over him, in the moments he didn't even realize he needed it. Before I finish, I want to invite you to join our prayer community for the Virgin Mary, a space of faith and hope where people from all over the world come together to pray and share blessings received. If you feel in your heart the desire to be part of this chain of prayer, click below and become a member of the channel today and come pray with us. And if you made it this far, to the very end of Marcus's story, do one thing for me. Write in the comments, "Snow gave way," when the snow gave way and revealed the shelter that saved a life. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read "Snow gave way" in the comments, I'll know that one more person believes that miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Write in the comments about a miracle you have witnessed or experienced, and share this video with someone who needs renewed hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.